My first impressions of Como Lake Resort are nothing short of outstanding. I was a little nervous driving in because the main house has got tar paper on the front, but as soon as you walk in and you're welcomed by the hosts, Tracy and John, you felt like you're coming home. I'm a big believer that every resort or lodge or outfitter has a heartbeat. Oftentimes you get a feeling when you walk into a place or onto a piece of property, and that initial feeling gives you a sense of what your trip is going to be like or what your vacation is going to be like. And I knew right away, as soon as we saw beaming smiles and outstretched hands welcoming us, that this was going to be a fantastic trip. I was given a map of the lake and shown where the boat hazards were, along with where great fishing spots are. But I was encouraged to explore. And for me, that's where the fun is. When you come to a brand new lake and you get to figure things out for yourself, there's nothing like it, especially when you find success. Como Lake Resort is the only resort on the lake, so the pressure on these fish is literally next to nothing. I bet you some of these fish have never seen flies before. And that's the beauty of coming to Northern Ontario, is you legitimately have the ability to fish in waters where maybe no fly fisher has been. Where else can you find that? Smallmouth bass, we're here 10 days after ice out, and the water was cold. I was super surprised at how aggressive these fish were. We're talking water in the low 50s, 50, 51 degrees. But for fish that may have never seen a fly, they jumped on it like crazy. And they fight. They're not giant fish in the sense of length.
Ooh, good fish, man.
But they're thick and they're powerful and they're big.
Yeah, that's a good fish.
That's a great fish
That's
all
a
day.
Great fish, yeah.
Oh! God.
To give you a splash?
Yeah.
The northern pike fishing is just incredible. Yeah, you can catch a lot of fish, but you have a legitimate chance at catching a giant. We had a unique experience where we were able to fish a flat, not unlike fishing saltwater, you know, where you're poling yourself searching for bonefish.
Sweet.
And I'm here to tell you, there's nothing like fishing northern pike in 2 feet of water, especially when they're well over 40 inches.
Can you believe this?
That is a big pike.
Holy. I didn't even catch him and I'm shaking.
It's not every day that we get to fish for multi-species on one body of water. I'm at Como Lake Resorts, just outside of Chapleau, Ontario, in Algoma country. Here we're going to be targeting trophy northern pike, big smallmouth bass, and if time permits, we're going to go inland and search for some wild eastern brook trout. This is going to be an exciting adventure, and I can't wait to get fishing.
Ooh, that's a nice sized fish.
I will catch these all day.
That is what you're in for on this episode.
Well, after seeing that, I can't wait to get fishing either, Rob. What an unbelievable trip. Welcome everybody to the new Fly Fisher Live. My name is Mark Melnyk, coming to you from the new homestead, the new basement, the new office. It will get better, I promise, as time goes on. We have a fantastic show for you tonight. My very good friend, Robert Heal, guide on the lower southern Ontario tributaries of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario for steelhead and all things fish. He's going to join us. But first, we're going to take a little bit of a preview of something that we experienced together this summer.
In the heart of Algoma country, we discovered one of Northern Ontario's best-kept secrets. Here, just outside the town of Chapleau, is Como Lake Resort. Como Lake and the surrounding region offers some of the best sport for the outdoor enthusiast that the province has to offer, and we've come here to explore. While hiring a guide for at least a portion of a trip, particularly on new water, is always recommended, there's something to be said about heading out on your own and prospecting for what's available. So what is available at Como Lake? Most of inland Algoma, smallmouth bass, northern pike, and walleye headline the list, but it's certainly not limited to those. For the intrepid anglers willing to work, brook trout can be found in abundance in both lakes and rivers, and many of the lakes, including Como, offer outstanding whitefish angling. When exploring new water, it pays to stick with what you know. More often than not, what works on your home water will prevail on most lakes and streams. But don't be complacent and be prepared to be versatile.
If I've never heard a voice that's perfect for the Triple S Fly Fishing Tour, that is it. And I was so surprised when we were able to do that voiceover recording with Rob, and he just melted into the new Fly Fisher family perfectly. It was his first opportunity at hosting. He's been a guest many times on the show, but it was his first opportunity at hosting one of the shows basically by himself. May I introduce to you now, Mr. Rob Heal. Hey, Rob.
Thanks, Mark. Very kind words.
How are your goosebumps right now?
Just looking back at some of that footage, I can't wait to get out and do it again.
I know, right? What an unbelievable trip. So give me your first impressions of what it was like to host a show. I mean, not many people get the opportunity to step in as a host of a well-established show that Colin's created called The New Fly Fisher. What were your feelings going in?
Well, as you said, I've spent some time with the show, and I've done a number of shows where I've been the lead guide or whatever the case may be. But when the opportunity came up, I'm gonna tell you just a quick story because it's pertaining to my involvement with the New Fly Fisher. I was in Newfoundland 2 years ago with my father. We were salmon fishing on the Lower Humber River when Mark phoned me, and he left me a message. And I'm thinking, what the heck does Mark need from me? And when I phoned him, we just got off the river, and I phoned him, and he asked me to do this, and I was, I mean, it's probably the single biggest compliment in my fishing career to be given the opportunity to host a show, but. Yeah, I've spent enough time around the camera, and I know some of the camera guys because we work together. I know you and Colin, of course, and Spicer's a great friend of mine. So yeah, I think it's going to be a great fit, and I'm excited as hell.
We think it's going to be a great fit too, or we wouldn't be doing this conversation right now.
right on.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about the region that we fished and Como Lake Lodge and what went on. Tell me a little bit about what your first impressions were when we got to the lodge.
Well, that was the furthest I'd been in Ontario. I fished as high as Wawa on a couple of occasions, but I hadn't been that deep into Algoma country. And I drove up from Fergus. That drive along for the first portion I've done many times up to the Sioux and Blind River in that area. But when you get deeper into it, it really becomes fairly desolate but that doesn't mean it's certainly accessible. The drive into Chapleau is fine. I mean, I can't remember how long it took me. It was around 12 hours or something. But I had spent my entire life in moose country in various places: Cape Breton, Newfoundland, Labrador, Northern Ontario. I never saw my first moose. I know this is crazy, and a lot of my friends that are watching this, I've told this story before, but I'd never seen a moose in the wild until I was in Newfoundland 2 years ago with my dad on that trip that we just talked about. We were up there what were we there for 4 days, Mark?
Yeah, 4 or 5 days, yeah.
We saw 5 moose and 4 bear and probably a lynx on the way out. I think we all determined, you and Ryan and I determined, Ryan the camera guy, determined that it was a lynx on the railroad. We couldn't get a picture of it, but
it was a big cat.
But
Lynx are about cat anyway.
Oh yeah. It's a spectacular region for for fishermen that want to get out and bring the family along. Como Lake is a beautiful resort. It's I don't like to say it's blue collar, but it's kind of, it's a little bit blue collar, but the owners are outstanding. Tracy and Jean treated us like kings for the 4 days that we were there.
Yeah.
We were there at a weird time, right? With the ice only being off the lake 10 days before. We were kind of right in that transition period. I would love to go back there, and I keep saying to my wife and daughter, we're going to go back there within the next couple of years and fish it in July or August when the bass fishing is a little more stable. But it's a spectacular region. I remember I pulled up into sorry, just a quick friendly story. I got a little bit lost and turned around and on the way there, and ended up in downtown Chapleau, which is not much of a going concern. But I stopped the first guy I saw, and this gentleman comes out around my age, and he's got a fairly thick French accent. And I told him what I was doing and where I was going. And meanwhile, this guy pulls up behind me in a truck and just stops. And this other guy is giving me directions to where I need to go. And I said, I should pull off to the side up here. And he says, no, don't worry about that. This is Chapleau. He'll wait. So it's a great spot. It's definitely worth the drive.
And we were there at a unique time, being 10 days from ice off. The water was cold. We really, really had to come up with a game plan quickly about how, because we were only fishing for 4 days, how were we going to, on a brand new lake, how are we going to target, identify, locate, catch and release the trophy smallmouth and northern pike that this fishery is known for. So, we were, both being experienced fly anglers, we really had the opportunity to put our heads together, generally over a couple of beers, and come up with a game plan. And the game plan worked out.
Oh yeah, it worked out. And I'm not a lake guy. Like I haven't spent a lot of time on lakes since my kid days in Nova Scotia, fishing brook trout with my dad. So lake fishing it's not really my comfort zone. But we sorted it out.
We did. I'm going to show a video here, about how to put the pieces of the puzzle together in order to be able to effectively, successfully target these species.
Right.
Oh, I think I just showed this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump back in and find that video. It's pieces of the puzzle. Just a second, please. Here we go.
We worked the extreme end of the lake and managed some success.
Nice one.
But weather, as it often does, didn't cooperate. We decided to call it a night and head towards the lodge under heavy rain. But the fish gods gave us a window of just okay weather, and after reconnoitering with John, we headed to another shoreline that would give us a couple more hours before dark.
All right, so we're approaching this creek ahead of us, and we noticed there's a considerable amount of debris in here that forms these dark spots. And we're thinking there's a good opportunity here to find some warmer water and maybe some staging smallmouth. So Mark has killed the engine, and he's just working us into it slowly. I'll be up on the foredeck, locked and loaded and ready to go if we spot any fish. We'll give it a go and see what happens.
We seldom have perfect periods to fish in, and because of this, it's important to recognize the subtleties of the current conditions. Few things become more important, particularly during transition periods, than understanding fish behavior based on water temperature. Pike typically spawn in water temperature of at least 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Smallmouth bass require a consistent temperature of about 60 degrees or better. With the main lake between 52 and 56 degrees, our best guess was that we were in a transition period and would have to seek out warmer water if we were to find any concentrations of smallmouth bass.
So, Rob, how do you locate those transition zones? What do you look for when you're in a brand new lake and you're looking for those transitions?
I don't know why you're asking me. You taught me all this. we were we were there was a couple of things we were looking for. This one kind of came together in a weird way, because when we found this this little pond off the lake, I would think we're going to show some of that footage where we probably hooked, I don't know, 25, 30
the shit show, you mean?
Yeah. No, I mean that clip where we got all those bass. Anyway, what we were trying to establish was finding warmer water, and there was a couple of really good points that Mark brought up to me, that because I'm mainly a cold water guy, other than my bass fishing in the rivers here, like the Saugeen and Maitland and Grand. But Mark explained to me that in lakes you'll often get areas of big debris deposition where that shore might be on the right side of the lake, that a lot of the debris that comes in off the shore just becomes deposited there. And that's typically large patches of dark, almost black bottom. And it stands to reason that those dark bottoms are going to absorb the heat more. So you may get in 2 feet of water, there's a substantial influence from the sun, and even with the ice only being 10 days off, that's what we were looking for. So we were looking at spikes. We had electronics in the boat, and we were looking for spikes in the water temperature as we cruised around. It was typically going from 52 to 57 sort of thing, Mark. But then we were also in the middle of what was a fairly warm period for the end of. We were there. When were we there? Middle of June.
Yeah, early June.
Yeah, and as soon as we found this little inlet, which turned out to be a sort of a tail pond for a small creek that came in, that water that was coming into that, it was a warm water creek, and there was a 10-degree difference. So it went from 52 degrees to 63 degrees in this back bay, and that was one of the areas that we really found a dense concentration of sort of cookie cutter, maybe 1.5 pounds to 2.5 pounds. Yeah. But we whaled them.
We did. We whaled them. And one of the things I'd like to add to that is when you do approach a new body of water, your compass is huge. The compass is huge because, as you know, sun rises in the east, sets in the west. So your western shoreline is going to warm up generally really quickly, right? And depending on where your prevailing winds are blowing, if you've got the detritus that's blowing into that western shoreline, you're going to have, in those shallow bays, you're going to have a buildup of dark material that is going to grab that sunlight and warm those bays up significantly faster than the main body of the lake. And that's why, Rob, you and I focused on shallow water on the west sides of the lake, is because of those prevailing winds and the sunshine. And when we found that little creek that was 10 degrees warmer, we made sure, first of all, that there weren't we couldn't see any beds anyway. I mean, it was very tannic water, and things were very deep.
We saw one bed. We located one bed. Yeah, that was it. The whole period that we were there, that was just an overzealous bass that decided he wanted to get his job done.
Yeah, yeah. You wanted to
But
get back there.
there was no spawning activity at all.
Right. And when we got in there, it was an absolute riot. Alex is asking, let's hear about your fly choices for cold water conditions. Well, if you don't mind, Rob, I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, cold water for smallmouth bass, you've got to realize that they're coming out of deep water, out of cold water. Their metabolism is very slow. They're not willing to chase very much at all. So low and slow is the ultimate when you're fishing early pre-spawn smallmouth bass. I will set out a caveat saying that where we were fishing in northern Ontario, north of Highway 17, in the zone that we were in is a 365 day a year catch and release season for smallmouth and largemouth, I believe. So, you know, the fact that we were catching these fish before the regular Ontario season opens up is totally legal. But what I was doing was I was fishing with an intermediate sinking line with a very long leader, and I was fishing small crayfish type offerings, things that would be starting to hatch. So small crayfish, small woolly buggers, small, you know, I even had woolly buggers with a 12 to 18 inch dropper with a big stonefly nymph or a Kaufman stone nymph or a dragonfly nymph off as a dropper that would, you know, doing the Brian Chan, Phil Rowley, Corona McCraw, you know, keeping those flies just off the bottom and as slow as you could possibly go was enough to incite strikes on the main lake. But when we got into this little slough creek, it was lights out. I mean, we were throwing clouser minnows. We even tried to throw poppers at one point. What about you?
Well, I would echo everything that you said. Low and slow, and what Mark means by that is you want to keep your presentation as slow as you can without getting hung up on every other cast or every cast. And one thing to consider at this point is although the bass are coming out of that long winter, there's going to be a period here where they're going to become very aggressive, and we found those aggressive fish based on the water temperature. The fish in the main lake, I think we might have only caught 4 or 5 bass in the main lake the whole time that we were there, because it was only 52, 53 degrees for the most part. And bass are they're not a warm water, smallmouth bass are not a warm water species, say as much as largemouth. I would consider them sort of a medium water species. So they're digging life mainly in that sort of 58 to 67 degree range, even up into maybe the low 70s. But you can, if you're there, you can find that period where they become just pre-spawning, where they become very aggressive. But we were mainly throwing smaller stuff. I'll show you what I've got here. This was one pattern that my friend Jason King tied. It's basically a little goby or a sculpin, and then your garden variety woolly buggers like these, you can fish a straight up woolly bugger as slow as you want in a lake. Where am I at here? In a lake, that's just your garden variety brown woolly bugger.
Unweighted.
Pardon me?
Unweighted.
Unweighted.
Yeah.
And you can really crawl that along. You might add a little bit of split shot to the tippet or the leader, and then you can get into something with a little more weight to it. Like this is you can see here, this has a fairly substantial dumbbell eye on it, and again, it's just a brown woolly bugger. But the idea is to fish it as slow as you can, and horse around a little bit with your retrieval, because you may get one of those days where the fish are really on and they're wanting something fast. But for the most part, in the conditions that we were fishing in, we were concentrating on a fairly slow presentation.
Right, until we got into this creek. And I've got to hand it to our camera guy, Ryan Pizzacalla, because, I mean, when Robbie and I found this situation and we got into it, and it started out by Rob just lobbing a woolly bugger, I believe, up into this creek, and he had 12 smallmouth follow that fly out. And he looked at me and he said, "I think we just hit the jackpot." And we stayed. We forgot that we were doing a TV show. We forgot that we were trying to make content. We forgot about our responsibilities to Jean and Tracy. We forgot about our responsibilities to everybody, and we just went fishing, and we had such fun. And unfortunately, Ryan, our camera guy, was caught literally in the middle of it. And this is the ensuing shit show, as I call it.
Hold on, I'm having technical difficulties here.
Put it in neutral. Are you in neutral?
Yeah. I was wrapped around the prop. Now I'm hooked up on the transponder.
Oh, I see your line.
What's going on over there?
Well, the line is.
Oh, here we go. Get off me, hunk of junk. Blooper. Line wrapped around my butt.
Here, give me your rod because I'm hung up too. What a gong show. Professionals, eh? We're the pros. Here, I'm gonna give that to you. I'm just gonna break this off if I can. Oh, I got it. I ended up getting stuff. Yeah, do you want to do that, Mark?
Before we get these things too jazzed up.
All right, so we found this little back bay, as you can see behind me here, and we didn't even get into the mouth and I hit a bass. And behind it was a half a dozen or 8 bass following it. So we proceeded to make 8 or 10 more casts. Mark and I just had both our streamers got hung up on the bottom, but we came back out and now we're regrouping and we're going in with poppers because there's nothing more fun than taking aggressive bass, and these bass seem to be really aggressive. So we're going to go in with some surface stuff. I just gave Mark just a little balsa wood popper, and I'm going to put on this Delbert diver because it's one of my all-time favorite bass patterns, and it'll create a commotion on the surface, and I'll be able to see it, but it'll also get down a little bit as I pull it under, sort of like a Rapala. So we're going to get these tied on and then just ease ourselves back in there. I think that this whole pond back here is full of bass.
So we actually, Rob, and I know you alluded to it, but I wasn't going to show. You have to watch the show on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time to see the shenanigans that went on when we're tied into double headers and not triple headers, but 8 double headers in a row kind of thing. It was just absolutely perfect. But that hats off to Ryan Pizzacalla for keeping his cool together during that shit show and insisting, because he edited the show, insisting that it goes in there complete with the Benny Hill music and everything, right?
That was funny because we were just like school kids. The two of us were idiots for about 20 minutes. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. So that whole thing unfolded because of warm temperature. Let's talk about the weather patterns that we had here and how that affected those bass. We were about to leave the lake because that storm system came in. And I'm asking you legitimately here. I've always thought that during the prefrontal movement of a storm coming in, northern pike and smallmouth bass strap on the feed bag and they really, really feed up until that low pressure hits, and then they generally shut right off, right? That didn't happen that day. The low pressure hit, and then the barometer started going back up again, all within an hour. And what's your thoughts on why those fish continued? Because we had fronts move in right afterwards again as well.
Yeah, we that rain that we showed in the video prior to that one, it actually rained quite hard. Like we were soaked by the time we got to that inlet. We were ready to call it and say, this is not fun. It was probably, it might have been 10 degrees outside. Me, like an idiot, was wearing shorts because I'm from Southern Ontario and haven't spent enough time in Northern Ontario. But I was uncomfortable. So that low pressure came in, and I think that was just a little cell that just sort of blew through, because within about 45 minutes, the sun came back out, and it was beautiful again. I warmed up. We started catching fish, so everything was good. So I think, Mark, that over a prolonged period of time, like I'll just say this, I would rather fish for trout any day of the week during inclement weather than smallmouth bass. I've seen smallmouth bass completely shut down and discontinue eating for not just hours, but for days.
For days.
For days. And they are literally not eating a thing. I've done enough sight fishing for smallmouth during tough conditions where you're doing everything you can. You're lengthening your leader. You're scaling down your leader. Going to 4X bullshit like that for smallmouth. And you'll watch a fish, even if I got a guy in the boat that can cast well and might be able to hit 55 or 60 feet. You'll see he'll make a cast with a hellgrammite or something finessey, a hexagenia nymph, something like that, and the fish will see it and they'll swim over to it and kind of look at it, and then they'll just kind of do this and go away. So they are literally, they're just not into eating. Trout will continue to eat. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you carry on with your trout thought.
Well, trout will continue to eat. They're during big fluctuations in the barometric pressure. They'll continue to eat. It will be slower. It won't be as frantic, which is why I say I'd rather fish for trout during really tough conditions than smallmouth bass any day of the week.
Right. They're finicky.
They are.
They're jerks. They're absolute jerks at times.
When they're on, they're great fish, but when the weather isn't cooperating, they're pricks.
So let's look at some of the flies that are, and we're gonna go from slower presentations to more aggressive presentations here with respect to early season smallmouth bass flies. As I alluded to earlier, you cannot go wrong with a slow presentation of any sort of crayfish pattern. You've got early season crayfish that are starting to shuck out of the rocks. They're small, they're vulnerable, they're not hard shelled at this time. They're generally slow moving, and they're an easy prey for smallmouth. This full motion crayfish with the dumbbell eyes almost looks like a shrimp pattern that you'd use in the Bahamas. It's absolutely deadly. And when you're fishing shallow water, or you're fishing areas that have a lot of that detritus that gets blown up on those shores, this style of fly rides perfectly because the hook rides up. With the dumbbell eyes facing down the way they do, that hook point generally always rides up, and it keeps you snag free. Moving along, we've got into the woolly bugger world. We've got beaver and tan, which is one of my favorites. I also like a bead-headed golden retriever. Flies that if you're fishing a floating line and you don't have an intermediate, you can throw a bead head, anything like a crystal bugger. Olive crystal buggers are deadly because they do look like crayfish. They do look like leeches at the same time. There's a good variety of woolly buggers that have proven. There's that crystal bugger on the left with a cone head. That looks like a unweighted golden retriever there next to it. A lot of these patterns are absolutely deadly. But when the weather gets warmer and the fish get more aggressive, then you can start moving into your streamer patterns, right? What do you think? What do you think about chartreuse over white with respect to minnow patterns like this?
I think chartreuse is one of the best colors that you can use. The Clouser minnow that I throw probably 75% of the time is the chartreuse over white with just like that one. It's just a little bit of crystal flash just to give it some life. But as Lefty Cray said, ain't no use if it ain't chartreuse.
I love it. Absolutely. Then you've got the Marty McFly. I'm sorry, the Scotty's McFly. This is a deadly smallmouth bass pattern that is absolutely wonderful. It's deadly on northern pike too. And again, white over orange. The Marty McFly is a wonderful fly. But as things warm up, and what disappointed me was when we did switch to poppers in that little creek, we didn't get any love. And it's really surprised me because we're up into the mid 60s, which is great popper temperature.
Yep.
But these fish were not looking up. So any sort of foam popper like this, or a concave balsa popper or a foam popper that moves a lot of water, that really chugs, is a fantastic choice for warmer weather. Low to mid 60s smallmouth bass.
Absolutely.
As you go along and you start, into post-ice migrations of things like smelt and shiners, you get things like Murdish minnows and game changers that are really fantastic for smallmouth bass. They're bigger offerings that really do well. And we're going to get into pike flies in a little bit, but a little teaser. Red and white bunny leech, just like my grandfather used to throw that big old red devil off the dock all the time. Red and white is deadly for pike, don't you think?
Well, you made a good point a couple of about 30 seconds ago about the just changing your patterns. Excuse me for 1 second. I got a whole bunch of flies out here, and my cat is lurking around. So you made it.
Don't worry, my wife says that we can handle it remotely.
Yeah, it's just in her nose. She'll be fine.
Yeah.
You made a good point about as you get into the more aggressive fish. I liken it to I like to tell people to liken it to their spin fishing. When smallmouth are slow and lethargic. You fish them slow. An old friend of mine used to say, when the fishing is slow, fish slow, and when the fishing is fast, fish fast. So if we're spin fishing, we're typically throwing grubs and jigs and slow stuff that we can just sort of bounce along off the bottom. And as the fish get more aggressive, you start chucking crankbaits and body baits and yada yada yada. And we're doing the same thing. So when it's really slow, we're sort of getting jiggy with it with those heavy flies, and then when it speeds up, we can be more aggressive and go with more bait fishy quick patterns because the fish are going to respond to them.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we didn't talk about, and we actually didn't do when we were at Como Lake Resort, was we didn't fish any balanced leeches under an indicator. And that's one of my favorite ways to target smallmouth, especially negative smallmouth. Right? You've got a long leader down in the strike zone with a strike indicator, a bobber.
Yep.
And you let the motion of the ocean move that balanced leech, whether it's an ice minnow or a bruised leech or what have you, and it's deadly for smallmouth bass.
And I think if we had found concentrations of fish in the main lake, like if we'd have marked fish, we weren't marking a lot of fish. they were really spotty, right? Until we found those fish in those two little bays. But I would agree. It's not a style that I fished. I certainly recognize it. I've watched enough of Phil's shows and Brian Shannon, those guys. And the pattern itself, or the concept, just looks like it works.
Right. Well, before we move on to Northern Pike, let's take a look at the creek mouth summary. And here's a quick little video about what we experienced. Again, you're going to have to see the whole thing for yourself on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel.
And Rob launched a fly into the creek mouth, and about 12 smallmouth bass followed him out. We found the money. We found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So we inched our way in, and it was mayhem. We felt like school kids during a piñata fest. When the piñata breaks, candy goes everywhere, and kids are scrambling. That's what it was like in the boat. It was cast fish, double headers. We must have had 8 double headers in this creek. We fished them for an hour, just laughing and giggling and carrying on, driving our camera guy, Ryan, absolutely crazy because he couldn't hold a shot. Because as soon as I'd let a fish go, Rob would have one on. As soon as Rob let a fish go, I would have one on. Then we'd have a double header. It was smallmouth bass heaven.
There's no better way to describe it than that. Smallmouth bass heaven.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So one of the cool things that happened, and keep in mind, everybody, we're still on day 1 here. I mean, like, this is day 1 of a 4-day trip.
Yeah.
We decided that, it was starting to get a little darker, and we decided that we were going to back out of that creek, maybe come back in a couple of days, maybe after experiencing some brook trout fishing. And as I was pulling Jean's boat out of that creek, we saw a log that wasn't there when we went in. And I'll let you set it up, Rob, before I get this video teed up. But it was one of those things that fishing dreams are made of. That is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it just seemed to completely unfold right in front of us.
So we had traveled about, I don't know, probably 300 or 400 meters along the shoreline, and everything was perfect. The sun was right. It was dead calm, and I was up on the front of the boat just looking for fish, and we didn't see any. I fully expected to see some pike in there. I saw lots of logs that looked like pike, but there was no fish. So then we hit the creek or the tail pond, and we fished that, and we came back out, and when you get fish eyes, anybody that sight fishes gets fish eyes, and it's like
you see things that do not
every
exist.
shadow and log and even a friggin' cloud coming across in front of the sun.
It's a giant. It's a giant.
So we're coming out, and I am not expecting to see a 43-inch pike, and all of a sudden there he is. And I'm not going to tell you what I said, but it had an F word in it.
And
big effing pike. And I had my rod all ready to go. And Mark said, get it on him. And I completely botched the first cast.
Okay, hold it right there.
Okay.
Let me roll this. You don't need to disparage yourself. Let the video do that. That's what's great about this. All right, here we go.
Action slowed down on the inlet. We moved back out onto the main lake. It was near dusk, but the light remained good enough on the calm lake that we decided to spend the remaining evening cruising the shoreline in hopes of locating cruising pike. And that paid off in spades.
Dummy.
Oh, he turned.
I know.
He's got it. I got him. Sweet. Got to see the eat and everything, man. That was awesome. Let me turn the boat. You all right?
Yeah. It's a big fish.
How's that?
That's a big pike.
So what happened there, bud?
I just we just came out of that little bay, and he was sitting in the middle of nowhere. And we've been seeing so many logs that look like fish, and I said, big pike, big pike. I put that little red and white guy on it.
Twitched it right by his head, came over, I saw him eat it.
Yeah.
How cool was that? In
It's a good
in 2 feet of water.
And we were just saying, well, we were saying a couple hours ago, how wouldn't it be nice to find a cruising fish? He wasn't cruising, he was just sitting there, but
Look, he's pulling the boat. The big fish, man.
I can't slow him down.
We got lots of time. I'm gonna come up behind you.
We'll just watch that rod.
You got it.
And just try and keep him off balance.
What was cool was that you put it beside him, right, at his tail, and brought it up towards him.
Yeah.
He looked at it, 2 strips, and he came, big mouth, took it all. Let's get this guy out of here. Oh my gosh, Como Lake. For the first time being here, I'm pretty impressed.
That's a big pike. That is a big pike.
Welcome to Algoma. Oh my gosh, it's huge. It's a giant.
You didn't like that.
Nope. That is a stud northern. I was hoping he was going to swim right into the net there.
I think he's getting ready here. 15-pound fish on.
It's amazing you don't get to see the size. You really get to see the size when they come out of the water, right?
Yeah.
That refraction, it was really deceiving. Don't let them go to those cedars. Oh, look how wide it is across the back, Rob.
That's a big. I think that's the biggest pike I've ever caught.
Really?
I think so. I'll bring him to you.
Oh my goodness. Yes! Can you believe this?
That is a big pike.
Holy. I didn't even catch him and I'm shaking. All right, guys, this is a 43-inch northern. We are going to be very careful with her. Okay, you can clear the net. Good job, Rob.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.
It was a good fight. What we're going to do is just make sure that she's okay, and she'll let me know when she's ready to go. I think she's ready. Thanks, sweetheart. What an unbelievable animal. Rob, is that your biggest northern?
That is my biggest northern.
Congratulations,
Thanks,
buddy.
man. And to get it the way we did, just spotting it out in the
See,
flats.
soul stirring absolutely takes your breath away,
it does.
doesn't
No,
it?
I know. And you know what? I'm a believer now. I get it. I've caught my share of pike, but mostly on conventional gear, and that was a riot.
Absolute thrill.
That was a riot.
It was a thrill to net it for you, my friend.
Thanks.
All right.
It's neat to relive that.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, I know there's lots of guys out there and that pike fish and fish for trophy pike. I've never really been a pike guy, but when we first found that fish, I just had no idea how big it was. We've caught a few muskie, mainly in the Saugeen here in southern Ontario. I don't think I've ever got one that big. I caught a lot in that sort of, not a lot, but a number in that 35 to 38 inch range. But the still picture didn't do that fish justice. It looks a lot smaller in that still shot. It was a big fish. We put a tape on it. It was 43 inches.
Yeah.
116 pounds.
125,000 pounds. And that was the fly that did it, man. The red and white.
It was actually, Mark, I have the fly. I just happened to go into the tickle trunk, and
There you go.
that's the actual fly that got it. He took a beating. He lost one eye, so he's now referred to as old one eye. But that was a pattern that was given to us by my good friend Nick Groves here in Fergus. And for those of you that know Nick, you already know he's a brilliant fly tyer. For those that don't, we have two guys here locally, Nick Groves and Jason King, who, as far as I'm concerned, are some of the best fishing fly tyers maybe in the country. They can tie anything from a size 20 caddis pupa up to these ridiculous quarter chicken dinner bullshit flies that the muskie guys like to fish. But they're I call them the mad scientists of the streamer world now, because they really are. I mean, these dudes go out there and they swim test their little flies and put them in the water. And if they don't, here's what happens. Here's what happens. So Jay and Nick, I hope you're watching this, but Jason will go out and he'll swim test a pattern. And if he doesn't like it, you know who he gives it to? Me. And I go out and catch fish on them. So
It's good
like
problem
these
to
guys,
have.
they're just weirdos. They're weirdos, but they're absolutely brilliant fly tyers.
All right, let's take a look at some of the flies that these guys tie and the equipment that we use in our time up at Como Lake Resort. Most of these flies are tied by these gentlemen. So let's take a look at that.
Como Lake Resort is the diversity of the fish in Como Lake. Now, when you come here on your fly fishing vacation, do a little bit of research as to what's in the lake, what's swimming, and what these big northern pike and large smallmouth bass might be feeding on. Well, first of all, there are a ton of whitefish in this lake. This is a pattern tied by Nick. All of these basically are tied by Nick Groves from Ontario, Canada, mimicking something that could be considered a whitefish. It's got a rattle in it. There are a ton of perch, yellow perch, jumbo perch. So bring along some perch patterns. There are smallmouth bass that pike will feed on. A great bass pattern as such. And right now, being early June, there are suckers spawning in the creeks and in the rivers. And if you know what suckers look like, they often are black and they have an orange tinge to them, an orange stripe. So a sucker pattern is also something to consider. Another fish that is prevalent in most northern lakes here in Ontario is, of course, walleye. Northern pike love to eat walleye, so make sure you bring walleye pattern. And one of my favorite flies to bring on any fishing vacation, be it saltwater or freshwater, is Blaine Chocolate's Game Changer. This thing truly does change the game. Whenever you go on a fly fishing vacation, do some research to the lake that you're going to. If it's new to you, match the hatch, bring the flies that these northern pike will key in on to up your chances at landing an absolute Como Lake giant.
For this week's episode, we used an array of rods from 6 weights through to 10 weights. The reason for the variant there is when we were fishing smaller flies for bass, the 6 weight is all we really needed. A 6 weight rod will handle just about any smallmouth bass on the planet, and it'll also handle these reasonably sized flies. However, when we switched to pike, we didn't necessarily switch to a 9 weight to accommodate the fish. The majority of the fish we were catching were between 3 and 5 pounds, but the flies that we're throwing require the heavier rod. So we went with 9s and 10 weights for throwing heavily weighted flies such as this. So each rod was paired up with a large arbor reel. It's important to have a large arbor reel, especially when you're in a boat or stationary where you can't run back, say, from a bank. If a fish does decide to turn and come back at you quickly, the large arbor reels pick up line far faster. For the most part this week, we caught all of our fish on floating lines, which is nice because they're far easier to cast. And our leader setup was fairly simple. Being in the lake with not a lot of structure to deal with, we simply went from 60-pound to 40-pound fluorocarbon, and then about an 18 to 20-inch section of wire knottable bite leader. We kept these fairly short, under 7 feet, because these fish typically are not leader shy. The shorter leaders are far easier to turn over, and of course the heavier the leader, the easier it is for that to turn over as well.
Rob, were you happy with your leader setups for those fish during that trip?
There that may argue this point, but I don't find that that leaders for pike in lakes, it's not rocket science.
No, it's not.
If you're fishing a lot of structure, a lot of heavy structure, you may want to put a break section in there. So you might go like 60-40, and depending on what you're using for your leader. For your tippet or your end section, you might want to have a section that you can break off if a fish does take into some woody debris. But for the most part, you want to keep it short, as short as you can. When you're trying to chuck a 5 or 6 or 8 inch fly with a 10 or 12 foot leader, it's just too much work. It's way too much work. Keep your leader down well under that 9 foot range, like 6-7 feet. If you have to go deeper for them, then you can use a sinking line or an intermediate timer. And one of the many densities of sink tips and sinking lines available to sort of meet the needs of what the fish are doing. But yeah, the leader itself is not that complicated.
Yeah, so my go-to leader for northerns is generally a piece of from the fly line loop to loop to 40-pound mono to probably 2.5 to 3 feet, 40-pound to 30-pound to 25-pound bite wire. And I've caught big fish on that. And one of the cool things about northern pike is the bigger they are, the easier they are to catch on lighter tippet because their teeth get spread out further, and oftentimes that knottable bite wire will actually fall between their teeth and not get, you won't get bit off as much as you do with those little hammer handles.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you really don't need to worry too much about it. From Rod, so did you guys fish for whiteys or walleyes up there? We did not. The whiteys were still deep, and there was a group that was in just as we were leaving that were fishing purple pimples on 14-foot rods in 60 feet of water, I think. We were a little early for the mayfly hatch. I've seen the mayflies up there go off, late June, early July, where they're thick as thieves, and those walleye and those whitefish will come up and you can pattern them on fly, and you can actually catch them on dry flies, which is stupid fun. But we were there a little bit too early for that.
We did see some.
That's for you, man. I'm not a fly tire, so Robbie, it's all you.
What good patterns are tied with turkey feathers for bath? I figured crayfish for sure. And hi, Sean. Thanks for tuning in. There's if you got a pen and paper, there's an excellent crayfish pattern. I think it's just called the turkey cray. I think if you Google the turkey cray, that'll come up. It's quite simple. And I believe they're using wing feathers for that as opposed to tail feathers. I could be wrong. But I'll tell you what, I'll see what I can find, and I'll get with you. I get your information. So, but yeah, turkey's very versatile. It makes great wing cases and legs. The turkey cray. I know Jeff Parks uses that fly. I'm pretty sure he uses that fly a lot on the middle grand section for bass. So. I have a question. Can bass flies like bass bugs and crawdads work for pike. Mark, I'll leave that one to you. I don't associate bass flies with, I don't associate crawfish with pike fishing, but it doesn't mean that they wouldn't work. I can't hear you, Mark. I don't know if anyone else can.
There we go. How's that?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So yeah, for northern pike, bass bugs and crawdad flies absolutely will work. If you fish conventional in any way, you know, as I have ever since I was a little kid, you know that if you're pitching tubes for smallmouth bass, you'll often catch northerns on them. It's you know, those crayfish and anything that disturbs the surface, pike will go crazy. Whether they're frog patterns or whatever, it'll be so. Absolutely. You got to remember, pike are opportunistic feeders, and they'll feed on anything that they can wrap their mouths around. The host recommend heavy fluorocarbon. I do not. I've seen too many people lose big fish to fluorocarbon, even IGFA legal 130 pound. As I said before, it can fall between their teeth, and you can get away with it, but it's a game I'm not willing to take. And to leave a big fly in a fish's mouth, that's not cool in my opinion either.
I'll just add my 2 cents worth, because I'll be 100% transparent. I'm not a pike and muskie guy, but I've done enough of this shit. When we're talking big fluorocarbon, like that 80-pound test, 60 and 80-pound test, I think the bigger reason for using that over a bite wire is simply turning those ridiculously big flies over. When you're throwing stuff like this, if you've got a 60, say 3 feet of 60, 3 feet of 40. Sorry, like this, you can see how big that is. It's not an enormous fly. It's about maybe 5 inches. If you got 3 feet of 60 pound, 3 feet of 40 pound, and 18 inches of bite leader, this fly will turn over easy. But when you get into, and I don't have any huge musky flies, but when you get into these 12 and 14 inch patterns that a lot of the guys like Schultz, those guys down in Michigan are using, and the real serious guys in Southern Ontario are using, you can't turn that over even on 30-pound bite wire. It's just gonna go out and just collapse. So the idea behind using the real heavy, like that 60-pound tippet or bite section is more to accommodate throwing those ridiculously dead cat size flies than the biting, having them bit off.
And back to a question that was asked earlier to that, Rob, is that, you know, how far do you have to cast in order to catch these fish, these big northerns? Fish don't care what your cast looks like. You can cast 10 feet, you got a shot at catching a pike. I mean, that northern that you landed was
144 feet.
What?
It was less than, it was like 25 feet tops.
I've come across northern pike run into after taking a fly and bumped my boat. Northerns and muskies, they're the premier predators on the lake. They do not give a crap about I've seen muskies come up and check out props while they're moving to say, hey, you're in my territory, what's going on? Steve, come on. You know, Rob can kick my ass all day long.
Yeah. Hey, Steve. Just going back to that pike or the muskie thing. I was on the I was fishing on the Saugeen with some friends quite a few years ago. And one of the guys that I was with, it was just a boys' weekend kind of deal, had a one of those little rodeo kayaks, and we were anchored up having a beer in this big musky pool, and we're sitting there anchored, and we got the drift boats anchored, and this guy comes down in his kayak and is sort of just hovering beside us. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this massive, like I'm going to say a 45, 48-inch muskie, just comes up in between the two boats, right beside his kayak, and then it just ghosted away into nothing. What makes a fish do that? I mean, these guys, they're the top of the food chain in that river, and if they want to come up and check you out and get a sense of what the hell you're doing there, they're going to do that.
They're looking for chicken cordon bleu versus a Big Mac. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So one more question. What length, material, and weight rod do you recommend for northern pike? So I fish northerns. I do not fish anything less than an 8 weight for northerns. And the reason why I fish 8 and higher isn't because of the size of the fish. It's because of the size of the flies. I need to be able to punch big flies through wind. The windier it is, the heavier gauge rod I'll use. We fish Orbis H3s, 9 and 10 foot rods for northerns, just so that we can get those flies delivered to those fish through the conditions that we fish them. What about you, Rob?
I would agree with everything you said. The most 8 weights most 6 weights will handle the pike around here, but when you're throwing those big rods, it just becomes too much work to throw big pike flies with a 6 or 7 weight. Eights and 9s is the way to go. And if you're talking muskie, not 9 to 11 weights. Now there's a lot of guys out there now that are getting very innovative with what I would call sort of water shedding synthetic materials in their flies. Most of the flies that I've showed you here we're using natural materials for the most part, like feathers and natural stuff that hold a lot of water. But if you've got a fly that sheds water quickly and you're only throwing it up to 6-7 inches, an 8 or 9 weight will handle that as well. But you don't want to work too hard. That's the idea.
Sure. The only issue with that is that and it's a benefit actually, that when you're fishing synthetics versus naturals, it's a 1 or 2 false casts and that thing's as dry as it was when it came out of the package.
Exactly.
So you don't have rat fur or fox fur or anything or deer hair that's holding and retaining water the way it's supposed to be. Mr. A, what are your favorite pike fly colors? Red and white and chartreuse over white for me, hands down.
Me too, because that's what I caught my biggest pike on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't go wrong with the with all those sort of go-to spinning flies, the 5 of diamond or spinning lures, the 5 of diamonds, the red and whites, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Pike aren't sophisticated fish, but they'll eat a turkey.
Yeah, I once caught a pike conventionally that if you were to hold it straight on like this, its back went like this, around and then out to its belly. It ate a turtle. So those things do anything.
Yeah.
They really will. Hey, before we answer some more questions, we're here to talk about Como Lake Lodge. And Jean and Tracy Cassinguay are absolutely fantastic hosts. Rob alluded to the feeling that you get when you step onto their property and you become part of their family. I want to show you a little bit about what Jean brings to the table. Tracy, unfortunately, was so busy during our shoot that she didn't have time to even sit down and talk to us for a minute. But this is what you can expect when you come to Como Lake Resort.
There's so much to offer, as in rivers and streams and lakes. We've got it all. Like the area of Chapleau, which is still within the Algoma district, has so much to offer for the angler, the hunter, anything you really want. It's here. It's all here. We have fully equipped cabins with hot and cold water, full kitchen amenities, propane stove, electric refrigerators. We are totally off the grid, but we have a diesel generator that powers the whole camp, and it works out perfect. We're true believers, Tracy and I, that to come out to a place like Como Lake Resort is to get away from that hustle and bustle of everyday life, and take time to enjoy life and admire the surroundings and relax. People need to relax. To travel here or to travel back home, you'll experience nature at its best. You'll never know when you encounter a moose, a bear, a bald eagle perched on a tree, beaver by a neighboring pond. Sky's the limit of what you can actually see here. And that's what we love about it. That's why we've never moved from Chapleau. We love the area, and we were fortunate enough to become owners of Como Lake Resort. We offer great fishing on Como Lake, fishing for walleye, bass, lake trout, whitefish, and pike. It's a great sports fishing. I never really knew anything about it. And now that I've seen what it's all about, and yeah, it's a great sports fishing. And we highly encourage sports fishing. And I think we got what Como Lake has to offer for a great fly fishing. We have everything to offer to you. The wildlife, the fishing, the fishing's at its best. I mean, we're not shy to compare our fishing here than any other lodge, and very affordable. And we think that's key for the average people out there, such as ourselves, to take advantage of what we have here.
I, for one, fell in love with Jean and Tracy, and they welcomed us into their home as guests, and we left as family. And it was an absolute highlight of my career to be able to fish and share the passion of lodge owners that really, really get the reason why people want to come to a place like Como Lake Resort to relax and unwind and experience everything that they have to offer. It was truly a feather in my cap for last summer. Anyway, I don't know where you were.
Oh, thanks. You muted me. I think I know why you muted me, because I'm sitting in the fart chair. It's creaky, and I was sitting there. I'm like, why did Mark mute me? Anyway, that's the fart chair, folks. Yeah, they were. I mean, they're just typical Canadians. I'm an East Coaster, and when I went up there, it felt like I was home from start to finish.
Yeah.
Came out and introduced themselves with their son who was doing some work. You know, they're always working on those places, and but at the same time, they're busier than three peckered hounds all day. But they were able to come in and help us with anything we needed. I would highly recommend it. It's very reasonable and great place.
Absolutely. Clean, comfortable. Nothing wrong with going to sleep with loons in your ear and all that good stuff. Couple questions before we go. What knot do you use to tie big streamers? Streamers, I always tie a loop knot, Steve. Always a loop knot. Never a straight to punch knot or anything. Always let those streamers move and dance.
Me too.
Yeah. Yep. And one more. My wife owns a hair salon. She brings home hair extensions all the time. I use them in the pilot. That's great. Thanks, Ryan.
I guess if we can use golden retriever fur, what the hell, eh?
Yeah, right. You know it. That's good. If that's true, Ryan. I mean, wow. Think of the curls. Think of the dancing, the undulation in the water. It's just amazing. All right, everybody. We've gone well over an hour. It's a good time to wrap things up. Rob, before I say my final piece, any parting thoughts on Como Lake Resort and John and Tracy?
I think we've covered most of it. We're hopefully in the next few months we're going to start coming out of this horse shit that we've been dealing with. I would recommend it. By any means, anybody that knows where they can reach me on Facebook, if you want to pick my brain about this place, it's wonderful. It's easy as heck to get to. You don't need a 4-wheel drive or anything like that. It's a beautiful lake, great place to take your family, and the fishing is really good too.
One of the things we didn't touch on is the brook trout fishing in the area as well, but you're going to get to see some of that in the show. We didn't spend a lot of time fishing for eastern brook trout, but they are there, and there are some prize specimens. So we were focusing on northerns and smallmouth bass. So if you're looking for an adventure in Ontario, when you can cross the border and get here, Como Lake Resort is a place that definitely should be on your list. Again, you arrive as a client, leave as a friend. So I want to thank John and Tracy and everybody involved with the running of Como Lake Resort. Rob, I want to thank you for doing an absolutely fantastic job as your first job, or your first hosting responsibility on the new Fly Fisher. And I look forward to the summer and working with you more.
I was taught by the best.
All right, guys. Have a great night, and we'll
Peace,
see you
everyone.
next Tuesday on
Stay safe.
New Fly Live.